everyone, this is Katie from Katie Loves Classic Books, and I'm here today with my May wrap-up. I'm finally kind of able to do my wrap-ups on time, which is really cool. I wasn't sure when I was going to have time, and today an opportunity presented itself, so how exciting, because I love sharing what I read with you all. So, the first book I read this month was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. And Emily St. John Mandel is a Canadian author, and this was published in 2014. So, the novel begins when, during a production of King Lear in Toronto, the main character, the man who's playing King Lear, Arthur Leander, dies on stage of a heart attack. That same night, a flu pandemic spreads and basically kills, or ends up killing, most of the Earth's population. And the novel is told partly before the flu happens and then after the flu happens. After the flu happens, we follow, well, a few characters, but mainly this girl named Kirsten. And she was in King Lear with Arthur when she was a little girl, and now 20 years later, she's part of this group of traveling actors and musicians called the Traveling Symphony, who are trying to keep her alive. So we follow some of them after this flu breaks out, and then some people before. All our characters are connected to Arthur in some way. So I wasn't sure what I was going to think of this. I remember when it first came out, and I wasn't really, very drawn to it because I'm not the biggest fan of post-apocalyptic novels. I will read them and I will read dystopians sometimes, but it's not really my favorite thing. Like, I really need something in particular to draw me to it. When I heard this was about Shakespearean actors, that really drew me to it, although there isn't that much Shakespeare in here, so if you're picking this up for that, I wouldn't recommend it, but I ended up really liking it. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads, by the way, so I didn't love it, but I really liked it, and there's just something about it that has really stayed with me, even though I don't think it's necessarily a perfect novel. It's mostly a love letter to art, and contemporary life, as in, like, all the things that we kind of take for granted that make our lives so easy, that we've become so reliant on, and what the world would be like if all of a sudden those things are no longer. Because so much of the population dies so quickly, a lot of things, just kind of fall away, like the internet and electricity and that sort of thing, because there's nobody to run them. So it's sort of, in a way, making us appreciate that. And yeah, like I said, there's so much to do with art in this, and that's what I love so much about it. But kind of the motto of this book is survival is insufficient. And that's actually a quote from Star Trek, I found out, but I loved how they utilized that quote in this book. And just there's an exploration of how art can get you through the end of the world as we know it. Like, we need that art for humanity to really stay alive, because, survival isn't really enough to live for. And how art can get you through, like, many ends of the world, like a personal end of the world, like when someone goes through divorce or some other major life change. How art can help get you through your own end of the world. How art mimics life, and through art you can find perhaps understanding and solace. The immortality of art too, but not all of it. Like, it's interesting to see what ends up surviving after this, like, flu apocalypse. Like, a lot of tabloids survive, and that's not something you would think would survive, but then so does, like, Shakespeare and Beethoven, and stuff like that. There's a character, and she was my favorite character, Arthur, the actor who, everything kind of weirdly revolves around him. He's not just a stage actor, he's really a big Hollywood actor, and he's married a few times, as a lot of celebrities are, and his first wife is this woman named Miranda. we get some of the book from her perspective, and I loved her perspective, and I loved her as a character. She is very quiet and artistic, and I just really understood her, kind of. And she's an artist, and she works, or has spent most of her life working on these comics / like more like graphic novel type comics called Station 11, where the book gets its title from. About this like space station that kind of looks like a planet where all these people live because something has happened to Earth. And these comics kind of mimic what people end up feeling after the apocalypse. So, and these comics stick around, so it's kind of interesting. And these comics help, while she's creating them, helps get her through what she goes through in her own life, and then it also kind of helps people after the world ends because it kind of mirrors almost what they feel. And I don't know, I found her a really interesting character, and the inclusion of those comics really interesting. Yeah, so this was a very interesting book. Like I said, not perfect, didn't love it, but I really liked it, and it stuck with me. And I think the overwhelming message of art and just what it is and how important it is, and that survival is insufficient, has stuck with me already. You know, it's been like a month, not too long, but still, like by the end of the month, you can kind of tell what has stuck with you or not. And this has, and I think some of these themes will continue to stick with me. And if you haven't picked this up already, because it was pretty popular when it came out, I do highly recommend it if any of those themes seem like things you would like, even if you aren't really into post-apocalyptic fiction like I'm not. The second book I read in May was Midwich Cuckoos by John Wyndham. And this is published in 1957, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So, this is basically a cozy English science fiction novel. So it's science fiction, but it's set in like this little town in the English countryside, and so it has this like cozy English feel to it. So I wasn't expecting that, but I really liked that, I guess. It was kind of a cool setting for a science fiction novel. So what happens is there's a small town called Midwich, and one day everyone in the town falls asleep for I think a whole day. And that same day an unidentified object is seen in the middle of the town from above. Probably a UFO or something like that. And then when everyone wakes up, everyone appears to be normal, but then it is found out that all the women of childbearing age are pregnant. And basically it's about what this small town does when they're faced with a race that is mentally superior to themselves. There wasn't anything too crazy in this book, but I did find it interesting. Like I said, I kind of liked the fact that it was science fiction, but like with a cozy English setting. I find that kind of fun. Science fiction-wise, there wasn't anything too crazy. And I thought it was an interesting exploration of, I don't know, the other. Like what people do when they're faced with a different race and how they treat it. Do they feel threatened? Do they try to do away with it? I don't know, it was interesting, and I don't know if John Wyndham meant it that way, but I feel like it's an interesting kind of exploration of just what we do like on this planet, like aliens aside, to people that are different from us, and just obviously it's not the same as this book, like there's some race that's mentally superior or something, but just attitudes and fears towards those that are different. I don't know. I don't know if it was meant to be read that way, but I couldn't help but think about that a little bit. And just an interesting exploration, you know, about what would happen if we came into contact with aliens or beings from another planet. What would we do? And yeah, if they were superior to us, would we feel threatened and want to do away with them? Or I don't know, what would we do? So I thought there were some interesting questions, but nothing too crazy. Enjoyed the coziness of it. Yeah, and I've heard good things of John Wyndham. And I'm interested in reading more of his classic science fiction, because this was just a nice, kind of fun, different read. The third book I finished in May was Ivanhoe by Sir Walter Scott. and this is published in 1820. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads as well. So, I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I would. Ivanhoe is one of those books that, like, I never hear anyone reading in today's time, but when I'm reading classics, I can't remember which ones now, but I feel like when I've read classics, people in classics are reading Ivanhoe, which is kind of why I was curious what it was all about. But I thought it was going to be a dry read, and it wasn't. It was pretty, like, fast-paced. I was pretty interested. It was fun. I learned a little bit about a period of history I didn't know that much about, and it was pretty good. So, Ivanhoe is set in the 12th century in England, when there's a lot of tension between Saxons and the Normans still, and also Richard the Lionheart and his brother, Prince John. Yeah, and so Ivanhoe is a Saxon knight, and he goes off to the Holy Lands to fight with Richard the Lionheart, and he comes back to basically win the Lady Rowena's hand, who he has loved since childhood, but he gets swept off into other dramas, and other people get swept off into different dramas, and yeah. But the novel kind of centers on Ivanhoe, but yeah, he's not in it as much as you would think he would be in it. So, Sir Walter Scott is said to have created the historical fiction genre as we know it, particularly with this book. So that in itself is really interesting. And I did, like I said, learn a lot historically that I didn't really know that much about, which is cool. It prompted me to look some stuff up too. That being said, this isn't necessarily totally historically accurate. Like, there are things that are historically accurate, and there's some things that are more fictional. Like, it has like a romantic flair to it, so it is historical fiction, but it's also like historical romance, you could say, as well. But yeah, this was fun. I mean, it had jousts, not the boring kind, like from Lamore to Arthur, though. Sieges, romance, Robin Hood and his merry men, which I really liked the inclusion of. That was super fun. Yeah, so it was just quite a fun and interesting read. And it's interesting to consider this period of time when there was tension between the Saxons and the Normans kind of coming over to England and taking over. Why I think it's interesting is because in more recent history, I always think of England being one of those countries that has kind of, gone into other countries trying to colonize them and sending missionaries and conquer other countries, And so it's interesting to see in, like, English history that this happened there as well. And, I don't know, perhaps it would be good for everyone to remember England, a bit of English history, and, before they, kind of take over other lands that happened to them as well. But that's okay. Anyway, so it was interesting to read about that and to consider that a bit. Let's see. The characters were interesting. My favorite and kind of the heroine of the novel, which I didn't expect, was a woman named Rebecca, who was a Jewess. And, yeah, like I said, so much of the book kind of centers on her. And like I said, she is really the heroine of this novel, which is interesting. I heard Sir Walter Scott read somewhere that he treated all people pretty equally for his time and was kind of all for equality. And I feel like you get that. Like, he kind of, even though she doesn't necessarily get everything she wants, he kind of makes Rebecca, who's a Jew, the heroine of this novel, which is probably unusual even for the time he's writing in. Although you do see how difficult it is for her in the time she's living in and how Jews were treated, which was not well. But she was just a really cool character, and even like the most fleshed out and developed. And I thought she was a really great female character as well, considering the time period this was written in and set in and all that. And I really liked her and was surprised by that element, but thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, so this was a fun classic to read, and like I said, I don't hear many people reading it these days. And, if you want something set in the Middle Ages that's exciting and has the romance and Robin Hood and joust and all that sort of thing, but also you want like a little bit of history of like 12th century England and to check out kind of what early historical fiction looked like, please pick this up because you might be pleasantly surprised. The fourth book I read in May was The Samurai's Garden by Gail Tsukiyama, and this was published in 1994, and I gave this 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. I really enjoyed everything I read this month, I think. Yeah. But I still think this was probably my favorite by just a little bit. So, this is set like right before World War II really gets started. And it follows a young Chinese man named Stephen, and he gets sent to his family's beach house in Japan to recover from tuberculosis. And while there, he kind of gets to know his family's, or the housekeeper of his family's house, Matsu. And also Matsu's friend Sachi, who is an older woman who has leprosy. And besides his friendship with these two older people, Stephen also briefly kind of falls for this young Japanese girl named Kiko, and he just gets a lot of strength and peace from the seaside and from both Matsu and Sachi's gardens. So this was a very like quiet, contemplative novel, but yet interesting things do happen. But I just really liked its quietness and its meditative quality, and I loved the setting. The sea is one of my favorite settings, and added some peaceful gardens and like a peaceful like country town, and it was lovely. Yeah, and this is really just a wonderful novel about love and family and beauty, and it was just really touching by the end and good. Now, Stephen you grow to care for very much. He's a good guy. And the novel is his story, but it's really his story in relation to Matsu and Sachi. And their story is so wonderful and really what makes this book worth reading. I didn't really get the inclusion of the girl, to be honest, Kiko, that he falls for. She wasn't in it that much, she's not that well developed. But then I kind of saw a point to it near the end, like, we're kind of shown what youthful love is like, and then, like, more the wisdom of, like, older love, And maybe a lot of the time youth is drawn towards more external beauty, and how with age and wisdom comes an appreciation of true beauty, what is truly beautiful, and that was a beautiful theme. Yeah, and the juxtaposition of age and youth was just really interesting as well. Yeah, so this was just a really lovely, quiet novel, but just with a lot to it, and I highly recommend this, actually. So if you have any interest in picking up The Samurai's Garden, please do. It's a good one. This book I finished in May was The Inimitable Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse, and this was published in 1923, and I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. So, this book is part of the Jeeves and Wooster series, which is about a guy named Bertie Wooster and his butler Jeeves, and it's a comedic series, and Bertie is always getting into scraps that he needs Jeeves to help him out with. So it's very much like upper class British humor, and it was enjoyable. So this one it reads like a novel and isn't really split up as if it's short stories, but yet it basically feels like a short story collection that's just kind of linked, but that's okay. So Some of the incidents I found funnier than others, of course, but overall I found this quite a delight. It's not very often that I read like comedic fiction, like that's really not a very big thing. Especially because I like mostly like literary fiction and classics, so like comedy isn't really something you find. So it was kind of a relief to read something, you know, not for any like serious meaning, just for the plain fun of it. And that was pretty fun. So, the characters are fun. They're kind of like caricatures. I do wish more from Jeeves, though. This was all from Birdie's perspective, and I kind of hope at some point there's something from Jeeves' perspective, but we'll see. Anyways, two of my favorite incidents. One was when, so a guy named Bingo, Birdie's friend, plays a really big part in this book. He gets into a lot of scrapes, usually involving various love interests that he needs Birdie and Jeeves to help him out of. So he plays a big part in this. But he tells his uncle at one point that Birdie is this woman writer of like really sappy romance stories, and I don't know why, but I found that really funny. Another incident that's really funny is Birdie and his friends like to bet on horses, and they're staying in the country and don't really have any horse races to bet on, so they decide to bet on preachers to see who can preach the longest sermon. So, I don't know why that struck me as funny, but it had me laughing out loud. Like, a lot of this was funny, but not necessarily had me laughing out loud, but that incident, for whatever reason, did. It was just really funny, and the way it was worded, just kind of hilarious. Yeah, so this is the first Jeeves and Wooster book that I've read. It's not the first in the series. I think there's one short story collection before this one, but I read so many things that suggested to start here, so I did, and I don't regret that. But I'm going to continue in order now. I think the next two are short story collections that are actually like short story collections. Like this basically, like I said, feels like it, but it's passed off as a novel. And then we get into the novels. So I will at least read a few more until I get into the novels and really see how I feel about it. But so far, I thought this was funny, and I'm totally willing to keep reading. I've decided, because they don't seem like super linked, that I don't need to read them really close together. So I'm like a really like weirdly methodical reader, so I've decided that I'll read one every 6 months, so we shall see if I stick to that. So I guess look out for another Jeeves and Wooster book in November. The sixth and final book I read in May was Watership Down by Richard Adams. And this was published in 1972, and it gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Now I finished this the first day of June, but I'm counting it as May because I read it mostly in May. So yeah. If it takes me like a few days into the month to finish a book, I will put it in the next month's wrap up. But like if it's the first day and I read a great proportion of it, you know, before then, I'll just do that. So mostly May. Anyways, so this book is about rabbits, and from rabbits' perspective. So it follows this rabbit named Hazel, and he lives in this place called Sandalford Warren, and he has a younger brother named Fiver, who's kind of a small rabbit, but he has like psychic tendencies, and he sees that something bad is going to happen to this Warren and that all the rabbits need to leave. Hazel takes him seriously, and so do a few other rabbits, but not everyone. And so they flee and kind of go on a journey to find an ideal place for them to start a new warren. On the way, they come into contact with other rabbits who live in less than ideal societies. They come into contact with different enemies, you know, because rabbits are kind of pretty low on the food chain, and humans as well. So this is a book, first and foremost, it is a book about rabbits, and it's interesting to actually really consider rabbits and be in the head of one. I don't know, it's just not something you think about very much. And like I said, they are kind of an animal. They're a small animal, they're low on the food chain, but there's a lot of them. And just what that is like. And I think that's part of the really cool part of fiction is that we can step into the lives of people and into the lives of time periods and even animals like this book. And we get to have experiences that we would never otherwise have or consider. And so I thought it was kind of cool to really consider rabbits and to step into the lives of rabbits and to see what that would be like. And in a way, this very much dealt with rabbits and real problems they face, but yet there's like a fantasy element to it. And they kind of have their own mythology, which was like kind of the most bizarre part and stuff like that. So that was cool. But then there are layers to this book. And that is why I liked it so much. So one layer is that it definitely has an environmental message and really shows us what humans do to animals, like how humans, and just how it affects them really. Whether we really can end up helping it or not, I don't know completely, but just kind of the effects we have, like how we, will build on a certain area of land that belonged to a lot of animals, and now, they're exterminated because of that, or hunting them for food, or keeping them as pets, some animals, when they maybe should be kept wild, and just forcing them farther and farther away, and like kind of forcing them to have their defenses up because we threaten them so much. So definitely an interesting exploration of that, in different scenarios and different rabbit warrens show all the different threats. And then on another level, this is about humans really, and human affairs and different societies, trying to find out what is the ideal society. So through all these different rabbit warrens, again, we see different societal constructs that don't work. And the place where Hazel and his friends end up, Watership down, is kind of almost this like utopian kind of rabbit place. So that's what they're trying to create. They're trying to create a better society, and they take rabbits with them from all different societies. They even befriend other animals. They, nobody has too much power, and the chief rabbit is one who kind of becomes that because he just naturally deserves to be so, rather than other more, corrupt means. So really interesting book. It wasn't always like totally page turning, let me be honest, especially towards the end. Like I got a little bored of it. So it's not like thrilling to read, but yet it has so many layers that are so interesting that I did really enjoy this, and I think it's well worth it, and I think that's what makes this such a good book. I feel like there's so much debate, though, whether this is a kid's book or an adult book. I guess it can be both. But I wouldn't recommend this to really young children. Not only is it, like, violent, I just don't think they would really get it. Like, I would have been bored of this as a child, and I wouldn't have gotten it, and maybe would have found it kind of sad. Maybe for older children, maybe if you read it with your, like, children who are a bit older and explain it to them, but I feel like if you're not really going to get everything out of this, there's no point in reading it. So I do think it makes more sense for an adult to read it. So don't be put off that it's a book about bunnies. There's a lot to it. So those were all the books I read in May. I feel like I had a pretty good reading month. This month and last month, I feel like I've been reading a good amount. I try to read at least 4 books a month, and I've been doing more than that, so that's awesome. And I'm so glad I got to film this early, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any comments about any of the books I've read, if you've read them, if you want to recommend something to me perhaps, please feel free to comment below. If you want to read my written reviews and other things, you can follow me on Tumblr or Goodreads. I will link that below. I also have a Patreon account, so if you feel like supporting me, which is always just appreciated if you feel up to it, and helps me because reading is something that involves money to buy books. So if you feel like donating or supporting me, feel free, but you certainly don't need to feel pressured to. Yeah, other than that, I'll see you next month. Bye, everyone.